and we are live. This is the Black Powder Podcast, the only real libertarian podcast that has ever existed in the United States, North America, South America, Asia, Africa. Is Australia a continent? We're going to call Australia a continent today. And most importantly, in Greenland. We're looking at you, Greenland. Your clock is running out. You're running out of time here. America's coming. At any rate, I am your host today. I don't have my regular fellow host, but I am your host, the only real libertarian, Marcus Matthews, coming at you from sunny, slightly cloudy California. And today I have an extremely important guest on, because today is a gun episode, and we're talking about gun rights, which are your natural born rights that you are endowed upon your first heartbeat. I believe infants should be armed too. And I want to introduce Mr. Michel from the California Pistol and Rifle Association, president and two-way attorney extraordinaire, to the podcast. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So today, like I said, this is one of our firearms episodes, and I thought of no better guest. We actually go back a while, you know. I think it was the 8th edition of your book that I won from you, when we had a state senator here in California from the Bay Area that was, what was his name, Brian Yee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leland Yee.
Leland Yee. Yeah. And this guy was one of the foremost anti-2A people that we had here in the great state of California. And he decided that not only was he going to disarm us, but he was going to arm foreigners and Chinese gangsters here in the United States. And you did a post where it was a competition. Say, how do you caption something you posted on Facebook? And I said something to the effect, Li Ling Yi, you could buy Chinese fireworks in the front and illegal weapons in the back, something to that. And you sent me a book, to which I lent to a former coworker, and I no longer have it. Thanks, buddy. But you're also an accomplished author. So why don't you go ahead and tell the people who you are and what you do?
Well, I've been in the fight for the right to keep. I got out of law school a long time ago and went to work for a big firm, big international law firm. You know, very prestigious job. I enjoyed it to a degree, but the reality is you don't really get in the trenches when you're part of a big team like that. And so I wanted to get into the courtroom. I wanted to really do more hands-on practice of law. And so I started my own practice. And believe it or not, my father was an NRA instructor, so I was always very into the right to keep and bear arms since I was a kid. But when I moved to California, right after college, I kind of realized that a lot of people were being prosecuted for possessing guns in a way that didn't really make sense to me. I mean, these were good people, but the laws were so complicated that it was very easy to break one. And so when I started my own practice outside of the big law firm, I marketed to those people and started to build the practice from there. I then got connected with the California Rifle and Pistol Association, and I was a volunteer there for many years. And the CRPA is the state association for the NRA. And so we worked together with the NRA and started a number of different programs, range protection, hunting and conservation, local ordinance, opposition to local gun control laws, and then a number of different lawsuits, which we started before the Heller decision came down in 2008. We didn't really have the Second Amendment as much of a tool before Heller. But so for 25 years, the CRPA and the NRA worked together in California to advocate for the right to keep and bear arms. I am now the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association and the general counsel. I do that in a volunteer capacity, but I also have a law firm, Michel and Associates in Long Beach, that represents gun owners, but also does other more conventional, legal work. So it's been a long, long haul, 30 plus years, and I'm still fighting for all of our rights to keep and bear arms. We're now at a very interesting time
Indeed.
where with Heller and then McDonald and then Catano and then Bruin and Rahimi, the Supreme Court is finally getting back involved in setting the record straight on what a Second Amendment right means. It's still a lot of work to do, unfortunately, because there's a lot of courts out there that are misinterpreting and misapplying Bruin. But so I'm still fighting the good fight every day as much as I can, and working with great fellow believers uh, to try and to protect all our rights to defend ourselves and our families, and use a gun for sports, self-defense, or whatever lawful purpose there may be.
That's awesome. And I remember talking to a couple of my co-hosts about this. They're in Florida and North Carolina, and they're saying these things don't necessarily apply to them that we're fighting for here in California. And I countered that by saying, ask the people in Nevada and Colorado about what's happening in their states, because California has this bad habit of pricing people out of the housing market and overregulation that's sending Californians to other states. Now, some of
Yeah.
those Californians aren't necessarily pro Second Amendment.
No, a lot. I'm in Nevada a lot, and the folks in Nevada that come from California, they forget that they're refugees, not missionaries, and they are exporting the
Yeah.
California ideology, the big government bureaucracy, the progressive ideology. They're exporting exporting it to other states. That's not just gun control; that's the whole philosophy. But when it comes to gun control, I like to think of California as the moldy petri dish, the moldy laboratory dish of
Yeah.
bad gun control ideas. And a lot of those laws start here and in some of the other battleground states, New York, Illinois, some of the others. But those bad gun laws they're not just picked up by some politician in another state. They are pushed by some of the gun ban lobby groups that have headquarters in California, and by Bloomberg, Everytown Law, and Bloomberg's groups and other billionaire social engineers who want to tell us how to live our lives. They push these ordinances and laws all over the country. So California started with a so-called assault weapon law, the semi-auto ban, but now we're seeing a number of other states that have either passed or contemplating passing those laws, and all the other. I mean, California has something like 800 gun control laws, none of which work.
No.
They don't make us any safer, but they sure do create a lot of accidental criminals. So, folks in Texas, yeah, God bless you, and wherever you are, where you may have a more pro Second Amendment leadership and legislature, but if you're not careful, California and the gun ban lobby's ideology is coming soon to your town.
It will infiltrate your legislation if it goes unchecked, and that's one of the craziest parts, because a lot of people don't know. In the lead up to this, I posted a advertisement from a local firearms dealer, and in California, you could buy a M249. It's not an assault weapon because it's
neutered.
Yeah, it's pretty much neutered. But you can buy just about any firearm minus pistols, and we'll get to that. In California, any type of AR, AK, Barrett 416, which I think is far superior to the Barrett 50 caliber. You could buy all of that stuff here in California because the gun laws are so poorly written that it leaves massive. We've gone from the foldable ARs to the bullet button, and now the bullet button is banned, and now we're at these magnet lock things,
right.
And we just keep going on and on. And then when
politicians, they don't know. First of all, they don't know what an assault weapon is. They couldn't tell you.
Right.
Dianne Feinstein went through a picture book and said, "Ooh, that looks nasty. That looks nasty." That's how they came up with the original list of make and model firearms that they condemned, and then people just renamed their manufacturers renamed the guns and made a few little changes, and then they were legal. And so then they went after them based on their configuration. And so then they changed the configuration, and they just have to keep expanding it. And that's the game they play. They say, we're going to make everybody safe. We're going to ban this gun. Well, they ignore the whole substitution effect. They ignore the criminals. The criminal's weapon of choice is the first one he can get his hands on in the black market.
Right.
So none of these laws make us any safer. But as I said, they certainly create a lot of, in California, Dan Lunger, the former attorney general, once said that California's gun laws are as complicated as the environmental and tax code.
Wow.
But gun owners don't have a lawyer, a regulatory compliance counsel in their clothes closet that they can go, ask, is this legal or not? Which is one of the reasons that I wrote the book, California Gun Laws, which you can see on calgunlawsbook.com. And that's 600 pages now. And I can't wait till it's down to like a 3-panel brochure, because we got to knock a
That's
lot
the
of
plan.
these.
Speaking of California gun laws, there's a few cases that are pending, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. First and foremost, the so-called assault weapons ban. What's the status on that, and where do you think that's going?
Well, there's several cases challenging. CRPA has one. Some other groups have a couple challenging the state assault weapon law. And there's one that won. There's a judge down in San Diego who has got a lot of these cases.
Yeah.
Judge Benitez, Saint Benitez. I think I have his prayer candle. I think I have his prayer candle around here somewhere. He's a god. I light that up every time I'm filing a motion. But there was a number of different cases, and the reality is a lot of these cases, like the CRPA and NRA helped us on the Rhodey case, challenging the ammunition restrictions and the internet purchase ban and the background check every time you want to buy a box of ammo. The the semi-auto ban, the magazine capacity limitation. There's a dozen. What's happening lately is the cases that we're filing are, Bruin gave us back the shall issue basically in California.
Right.
But the anti-gun owner cities are trying very hard to make it as expensive as they can and take as long as they can and limit as many people as they can from getting a CCW, a concealed carry permit. So those fights are going on every day. In the meantime, in the Ninth Circuit, we have probably the lead case is the Duncan case. That's CRPA's challenge to the magazine capacity limitation. And that case we started with Judge Benitez. We won in front of a 3-judge panel. We went up to the Ninth Circuit en banc, the 11-judge panel. We lost 7-4. 7-4 there. Then went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, after Bruin, vacated the loss in the en banc in Duncan, sent it back down. The Ninth Circuit sent it back down to the trial court. We had to try that case again. It went back up. Then the en banc panel grabbed it. So it's now sitting in front of the en banc panel, but it's been up, down, back up. And a lot of cases are stayed. They're bottlenecked behind that Duncan case in California. So there's a case, magazine capacity case in front of the Supreme Court now that they may or may not take. Fingers crossed. But there's going to be, so the Supreme Court's going to have to rule again to break up that log jam and let a lot of these cases be decided one way or another. And hopefully the Supreme Court will they've got the Snopes, Maryland so-called assault weapon case there now. They've got a few others. They just need to take one and stop the shenanigans that the Ninth Circuit and other circuit courts are playing, because they don't want to strike down a gun control law, no matter how ill-conceived or useless it is.
Well, I mean, I think as a libertarian, one of the most tremendously difficult tasks is wresting power back from the government. And
just look at what's going on with Doge.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where we're asking the courts to give us back our rights. And I have a problem with a lot of Americans because they don't understand the concept of the Constitution being a shield, not a sword. Now, if you were to say it was a sword, it would be wielded by the people of the republic. But the Constitution is a set of rules for the government. And what we've had since the Whiskey Rebellion is the government wrestling the Constitution away from the people.
Right.
And with these lawsuits, and to which I don't understand, after the Bruin decision, where the Supreme Court says you need to look at the historical context of the Second Amendment and apply that to your decision making. Why do we have these judges still questioning that ruling when the ultimate arbitrator of this is what it is says this is what it is?
I mean, the short answer is they're biased, and they know likey the Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court said. And so they bend over backwards intellectually to twist what the Supreme Court says. They did it after Heller, and they're doing it after Bruin, even more so, to try and say that, right to keep and bear arms only covers arms. A short-barreled rifle is not an arm. A magazine is not an arm. That's the step one where they try and lock us from advancing our rights. And then step two, they do these flimsy historical analogs, like a Bowie knife law that justifies a semi-auto ban.
Yeah.
But if they want to uphold the law, and many of them do, often they don't know anything about guns themselves. If you get a judge, we got a judge in Illinois who actually knew about guns. When you get a judge who knows about guns, you win, because he knows that these laws are all baloney. So, but yeah, the reality is that there is a tremendous amount of intellectual and political and personal bias among many federal judges. They're inclined to rule a certain way. I wish I could say, and it's not limited to firearms. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. The Ninth Circuit is notoriously liberal. It's balanced out a bit more now because Trump 1.0 appointed some good Ninth Circuit judges. So now it's more of an even split there. But still, I mean, you've got certain judges in certain courts that get it and others that refuse to.
There's one thing I truly dislike about our political system is we have partisan judges, and that's a very blanket statement. I'm going to leave it at that. But when you interpret law through a certain political lens, it lends itself to tyranny, and that goes both ways as far as our political spectrum. I wanted to ask you, what's your opinion on that?
Oh yeah, if courts don't have to respect if lower courts don't have to respect the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court, I mean, and don't get me wrong, we're lucky right now. We've got 5, maybe 6 judges on the Supreme Court who get it, but it hasn't always been that way.
No,
a lot of times that court historically has shifted in the opposite political spectrum. But when the courts let the government get away with things, you do wind up with ultimately tyranny. There's the sort of the banal sort of institutional tyranny that we just get used to. They're not locking everyone up, but they could, and they will if you get a target drawn on your back. But yeah, that's the risk, and that's why freedom isn't free. That's why you have to fight every day to maintain your individual rights and freedoms from a government. Government bureaucrats think that the government, well, first of all, they want the power, and they think the government is qualified to tell you how to lead your life. They think they know better. But from my experience on government at all levels, the government could screw up a 2-car funeral. I mean, the bureaucrats don't care. All they care is every time you litigate against a government entity, their whole position is, well, you got to do what we say. We have all the power, you have none. Yeah. They don't respect. They water down the Constitution. They want a living Constitution that doesn't respect what the founders intended when they wrote it in the first place. After coming through a revolutionary war against a tyrannical government. So, this is the and again, this isn't just guns. This is the political divide that we're facing in this country right now. And thank God, Donald Trump is not the easiest guy to get along with sometimes, and he's picks fights that he probably shouldn't pick, and personal fights with folks that you don't. Why are you getting down in the mud? But the things that he's doing really are good, could save this country. If we, and that's why I think a lot of people are responding. But again, it's not just guns; it's the whole way of life and how much government control there's going to be over our way of life and our
And that
individual lives.
is precisely what this podcast is about, because the greatest minority is the individual here in America. And I am a strong proponent of government having the least amount of impact on your life as possible. And I agree with cutting the federal government 195%. I do. I just wish it would be done in a more precise manner than
Yeah, I hear you, but you know what? Clinton tried, Obama tried, one of the Bush presidents have tried in the past, and they get
mhm,
bogged down when you try and do it
PR.
slow.
Yeah.
They get bogged down and they never get it done. I will take the slash and burn approach, the disruptive approach of Silicon Valley any day. We can always put these pieces back in, but if you try and do it too carefully, you wind
Uh-huh.
up getting slowed down to the point where you never get it done in 4 years,
I can see that.
forever,
Yeah.
forever.
Because I was when Milei got elected in Argentina, and he started going through his drastic cuts to the government. Um, I don't recall hearing too much about public pushback. That I know there was a little. There was the bureaucrats were upset with what he was doing, but he seems to be turning around that country.
Yeah.
America is a slightly different beast, because I call this the 9/11 effect. After 9/11, the government elevated itself over the republic. It made itself omnipotent. Like they were saying, we need this Patriot Act because you saw what happened here, and if you don't give us the power to do the hard things, like being able to spy on you without a warrant, or at your adversary. Excuse me, I didn't mean to say you. That came later on down the line. But we need to be able to spy on these people we suspect to be terrorists and things of that nature. And the United States, the people of the United States said, sure, because we don't want this to
We were
happen.
scared because we were
Yeah.
scared. Yeah, and they capitalize on fear. They take advantage of public fear, and fear mongering is what they do best when they're trying to advance a gun control law, because they'll say these laws will make you safer. So we've got to ban this, that, and the other thing. We got to ban this type of firearm. We've got to ban guns from this particular place. We've got to ban everybody who's smoked marijuana. You can't own a gun. They want to maximize the number of prohibited types of firearms, the hardware bans. They want to maximize the places where you can't have one, gun-free zones, or criminal empowerment zones, and they want to ban as many types of people as they can from being able to possess them. And then in California, there's Gavin Newsom and the politicians in Sacramento have made no. They haven't hidden the fact that they want to eradicate the gun culture, murder the gun culture, because they
Right.
want to wipe it out as a political force. Because in a generation, and this is the scary part, in a generation, our children, if they're not taught to appreciate their freedoms, they accept what the government is doing, and
Precisely.
they don't know what they're missing because they never had it, because they were never exposed to it. They want to ban gun shows because, God forbid, you take your kids to a gun show and they see a lot of beef jerky, but they also see, you know,
Yeah.
guns. I mean,
That, that's a weird point, and it's a very valid point, because the amount of beef jerky and coffee that you'll see at gun shows is just simply amazing. I mean, it's right up there
there's only
with
like 30% of the tables are guns. Not even
yeah,
that many. It's ammo
yeah.
most.
It's bulk ammo and bulk beef jerky and bulk coffee. That's
Yeah.
and the coffee is strong. I don't drink coffee. But it's weird the strength of these coffee products that they're selling nowadays can like just take down a bull elephant with the get them hyped up basically. But I wanted to ask you about Gavin Newsom because I've always had this opinion, and I always cyberbully him when he talks about guns. I always say, lead the way, disarm your bodyguards with your
Yeah.
high capacity magazines, your pistols that we can't buy here in California, and your true assault weapons, your fully automatic, smaller, was the Q close combat. They carry those ones that they can fit underneath the suit jacket, the MP5s and things of those natures that none of us can buy. Why is Gavin Newsom's life so much more important in California than you or I or our families?
Good point. I mean, that's the same with any government official. Bloomberg, they all have armed guards surrounding them at all times. What do you need that for if gun control works?
Right. Just tell people they can't bring the gun to your events.
Yeah, put up a sign.
Yeah,
No
that should
guns
be enough,
allowed.
right?
No, that's all you got to do. Put up a little sign. No guns allowed. Then they won't. Oh yeah, that works.
If we put up those signs that said no guns allowed, we don't need any gun control laws because when everybody reads that sign, they'll know if I bring a firearm into
Oh
my
yeah,
local.
those signs scare the crap out of criminals.
Yeah,
Murderers.
yeah, that's nuts. And I'm there was one thing I wanted to ask you because I'm pretty soon I'm taking a trip to the state of New York, and they have their was it's Safe Act, whatever it's
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
So normally when I travel, I usually travel with a Glock 21 SF, and I can't when I go to New York because I do not possess a New York pistol permit. Now, does that mean the New Yorkers that do possess that are their lives more important than mine when it comes to me being able to protect myself when I travel to New York?
Well, now you're talking about reciprocity and interstate across state lines and that kind of respect and it shouldn't and in fact one of the CRPA's cases we just won on non-California residents being able to get a CCW from California issuing authorities, and that's about to roll out in earnest. There are several jurisdictions that are sort of pro 2A sheriffs that want to issue to non-residents. So, but it's not national yet. So,
Right.
and that's why this national reciprocity bill that may be pending in Congress in DC would be very important, so that it should be like a marriage license. A marriage, if you get married in one state, it's
Yeah.
married in all 50 states.
We had that pass the House. What was that in 2017? Congress?
Yeah, I think it was HR 218. I don't remember when, but that was a more recent one. That was way before 2000, or way after 2007.
Well, it was in Trump 1.0 because I remember it passed the House when it was within his first 2 years because he lost control of the House in the midterms. So it had to be 2017 or 2018.
But that kind of reciprocity is inevitable, whether it comes through a federal law or it comes through a court decision that says you can't, your right to keep and bear arms and you're in public, and bear means public, carry in public, doesn't end at the state line, because there's threats to you and your family and your property and all, everywhere. So that has to be respected nationally, and we're just going to have to fight our way to get there.
Do you think a national reciprocity will pass this Trump 2.0?
I don't know. You know what? I can't count the votes.
Right.
I can't count them. I know that there's several of our elected representatives who believe in it and are pushing it. I think, frankly, right now at least, they're just worried about getting the budget bill passed and tax cuts passed, and they've got some bigger fish that they're trying to fry. But I think they're going to get back to that. and other things. And we'll see. I think Pam Bondi's report came out today. I haven't had a chance to look and see what she did yet, and maybe it's not out yet. But he Trump told the Attorney General to look at all these Second Amendment issues and make some recommendations. That's going to be an interesting report.
Well, with Pam Bondi, I'm a wait and see type of person because in her interview, well, when she was being interviewed when she got nominated, she spoke about red flag laws, and I think of a gentleman named Duncan Lemp when I think of red flag laws, whereas they were serving a no knock warrant, imitating somebody busting into your house, and he did grab his firearm, and he was murdered by law enforcement
And the
when he
police. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what
Well,
to me. Go ahead.
well, I'm just going to say I'm kind of so the concept of taking a gun or guns away from someone who is violent and has exhibited violence or has done something to suggest that they're about to get violent, something concrete. I'm not adverse to that as long as, and this was what a lot of what Rahimi was about, as long as the process is set up not to be abused. It's too easy for somebody like a disgruntled ex-wife or girlfriend who wants to
Yep.
gain advantage in a child custody proceeding to claim that some guy is dangerous, to have a restraining order, not even necessarily there's gun violence restraining orders, that's the red flag laws, but just a TRO or a restraining order in general can take your guns away. GVROs are a spin on a problem that's existed for a while with restraining orders where people come up with baloney reasons for getting a court order to seize someone's firearms. And the person who files the complaint and doesn't even have to sign it under penalty of perjury. So there's
Right.
not really any remedy against the person who lies to try and get an advantage in a child custody proceeding or whatever kind of dispute you may be in that's unrelated to guns with a person. So you have to have due process, an opportunity to defend yourself. And I've defended a lot of TROs and got them struck down. There has to be notice. You have to tell the person that they're being prohibited and give them a chance to say why they shouldn't be. And then you got to give them a chance to get their rights back. So the concept of taking guns away from someone who is truly dangerous is not a bad concept. And
No.
Rahimi reiterated that. But the system is just so set up to be abused and taken advantage of that they're problematic.
It's I think it's tantamount to like civil asset forfeiture, whereas
where they seize it first and then you have to sue to get it back. Yeah.
right. And when you sue to get it back, I mean, as you know, and everybody watching, Mr. Michel has a very nice background there. It's not cheap to get a good lawyer to adjudicate your case for you.
See, now I got to make sure everybody understands. We give the cheapest rates. We are like way below market rate when we do Second Amendment work for California Rifle Pistol or anybody else. So
we're going to get to your marketing aspect.
I don't do it just if I wanted to just make money, I would have stayed at that big firm and represented oil companies for my entire career. That would be this would be a lot nicer house. I mean, I got a nice view right now, but I'd be in a lot bigger house if I'd have stayed at that big law firm.
Yeah,
representing Exxon.
I read about that in the Valdez, right?
Yeah.
Case?
Yeah.
And that's one thing. We've had Spike on and we on here, and we talked about this a couple times. The resources the government can muster against you.
Oh, it's unlimited.
It's completely unlimited. And
dollars.
Yeah, and you are pretty much subject to the home you own.
We're subject to the generosity of our donors and our members who understand what we're doing and want to be part of it, and trying to get the word out through forums like this that people we're in a historic time when it comes to Second Amendment rights. The jurisprudence, the law is changing, the law is evolving like at a pace that it has never evolved before in our history. And if you send $1 in to CRPA or whatever group you want to support, you're a part of that history. You're moving the ball downfield to protect your rights, not just for you, but for your kids and your kids' kids, and for the future of the country. So yeah, we're dependent on the largesse and the generosity of our donors and supporters. Where Gavin Newsom just spends the state's money, even though it doesn't have it. Billions and billions of dollars in the hole. Screw it. They just hired a bunch of lawyers for the California Department of Justice to litigate Second Amendment cases.
Yeah, just completely.
And then there's Bloomberg. Bloomberg, who spent $1 billion. He pledged 800 million like 10 years ago. And he has lawyers that spoon feed the state's lawyers arguments and spoon feed state legislators model legislation to push across the country. So we're up against a big money opposition, but we're doing pretty damn good considering
Damn right.
how we compare to them and how much we're able to accomplish on our budget.
So let me ask you this. When do you think California will be on par with like a Texas as far as our magazine and firearms?
Hell. Unless the Supreme Court really comes down hard, which they might, because a lot of lower courts are really thumbing their nose at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court should be getting tired of it.
They should.
But unless they do, the battles will get smaller and smaller. We're fighting over semi-autos. We're fighting over the roster where you can't buy handguns unless they're tested. We're fighting over ammo restrictions. We're fighting over CCWs, how long they can take to process those applications, how much they can charge for those. Some of those things are going to be settled, but the state will not give up. Bloomberg's got a lot of smart lawyers that come up with a new way to basically try and eradicate the gun culture by making it as expensive and as putting in as much red tape that you have to jump through in order to exercise your right. And this is not something that's limited to guns. This is what the Democrats did after Brown versus Board of Education. They didn't like segregation, so they came up with all kinds of ways. Rather than integrate a swimming pool, they shut down the swimming pool. I mean, a municipal swimming pool. So they're probably going to play those games for a while unless they're really smacked down by the Supreme Court.
Speaking of poll taxes, yesterday I went by Big Five and I bought some ammo, and the taxes on the ammo, which are now 11%, added. Luckily, shout out to Big Five. They have 1-day deals. That there's always 2 different brands and calibers of ammo that they sell. Yesterday it was some ammo in 9mm jacketed hollow point for $16 for a 20-round box, but I have to pay 11% tax on that.
Right. We've got a lawsuit going against that too. Tax laws are a little difficult. It's a little trickier to challenge a tax law than a gun law. You have to actually pay the tax first and then sue to get it back. So we've been going around and around on that one for a while. But that's another way that they're trying to, they want to price people out of the market. They want to, especially, and the folks who are not well off are the ones who need that. They're the ones who are the victims most often. They're the ones who need the gun the most to defend their family because they're in the zone that's probably a higher crime. So right. Yeah, it's disgusting, and it is like a poll. I liken it to like if you need an antibiotic, and the government, when they're filling your prescription, charges an 11% tax on it because they want to fight the Mexican drug cartels. Hold on, my infection that I need an antibiotic for is not contributing to Mexican drug cartels bringing fentanyl across the border. But that's the link that the state made, and it's all just an excuse to try and price people out of the market for being able to buy a gun or ammunition.
And that's what I thought the logic behind the lawsuit over that should have been. Because when it first passed, immediately the first thing that came to mind, because my parents grew up in Jim Crow, Alabama, and they experienced some things that shaped my opinion on liberty, because they saw firsthand how government, especially local governments, and the more local you get, the higher the rate of tyranny. I've always believed that. But they saw firsthand, what government can do to people when it goes unchecked. And that's what you're seeing here, because right now in the California legislation, there's I think it's still in committee about a self-defense law
Oh
where
yeah,
where you have the duty to retreat in your own house.
right. And that is a nightmare. I have tried. I used to be a prosecutor for a while. I've been a criminal defense attorney. I actually sat on a jury for a self-defense case. And it's very easy for a district attorney, a politically inclined district attorney, to what they're trying to do is insert this reasonableness test. So if it's reasonable to withdraw, you have to withdraw, you have to retreat rather than engage in your own house or outside in public. And then they argue this proportionality thing. Like if somebody comes at you with a machete, you can only fight back with a machete. Well, hold on a minute. I mean, this is not the Queens of, the Duchess of Queensberry rules here. I'm not trying to have a fair fight. I'm trying to survive. So I don't want, it's very easy for a Monday morning quarterback to say, oh, you could have gotten out of this situation. You didn't have to use such deadly force. And that's what's the problem. And that's why they created the no duty to retreat, so that you wouldn't get, hung up by a jury. Even if they don't mess with the self-defense rules, every bullet that you fire in self-defense comes with a lawyer attached to it, no matter how clear the law may seem to be. So this is it's another effort. It's in self-defense context rather than more generally, not necessarily with a gun, than gun control, but it's still about the government saying, rely on the government for your well-being. The police will protect you. You shouldn't defend yourself. Just run away and call the police. Well, wait a minute, man. My kids are sleeping upstairs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How do you get everybody? Hey, kids, we need to retreat right now because these guys are breaking in armed and want to steal our stuff. So how do you gather up all your people in a chaotic scene? It's an infantile-minded piece of legislation because it just simply it's written by men who sit down to pee. That's what I always used to say. Like Kevin De Leon, Gavin Newsom, Leland Yee. I'm not taking advice on how to defend my family from men who sit down to pee, because these are lesser individuals and oftentimes guarded by greater individuals.
And the worst thing is they think they're smart enough to do this. I doubt many of them have ever even fired a gun.
No. And one of the greatest things that happened in the last election cycle was Kevin De Leon being booted out of his final act of political office, which I think he's done after his racism scandal. But for those of you that don't know, Kevin De Leon was a state senator and state representative here in California that authored a lot of these things that Mr. Michel is currently fighting, or either authored, sponsored, or publicly supported all of these anti-liberty laws that we have here in California.
And that Leland Yee example really just tells it all. It's not really about, in many cases, about gun control or gun safety. It's about creating a conflict. They want to prop up the NRA, who they have demonized, and say, look, I'm brave enough to stand up to the big bad NRA, and that gets their name in the paper, and name recognition is what gets you elected. So that's why you get these small town council members who want to run for state office pushing local gun control laws because it makes the papers. So it's not even it's about self-promotion, not safety promotion.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems here in California, where you have a super majority, and then also in states like Texas, where you have a super majority on opposite sides of the political spectrum. Because how do you out liberal a liberal, and how do you out conservative a conservative? And normally, it's either you move way far left or you move way far right, and that's the only way. Because with gerrymandering, where they make voting districts look like fish skeletons, the politicians are selecting you. You're not choosing your politician anymore. And that's all across this country. There have been several cases about gerrymandering going on all over this nation. And most of the time, the Supreme Court sides with the political party that's doing the gerrymandering. And That's another thing that disgusts me because it excludes third party people like myself from having a voice because they're saying this is what's going to happen. And I don't understand how we're a republic when we have politicians telling us what's going to happen and we're not telling them. You know, I I'm glad you're a lawyer, and I'm saying this not as a threat, but as a philosophy. Politicians should do their job like their life depends on it, because this is a republic, and the people should and absolutely need to have the final say on such matters. Would you defend me in court with?
Well, there's a great podcast out there or on YouTube, Mark Smith with the Four Boxes Diner. It's the soapbox, oh God, I always forget this.
So, ballot box,
The soapbox, the ballot box, the cartridge box, and the jury box and the cartridge box.
right?
And we're not at the cartridge box stage yet. We're not to the shooting part yet. And I
No,
hope, and God help us, we never will be.
I don't want that.
God and Trump help us, and we never will be.
Yeah.
But that's what the Revolutionary War was all about. We got fed up to the point where we couldn't take it anymore. We were mad as hell, and we couldn't take it anymore. And so, that always is an option. That's what governments that don't citizenry that lets the government get to the point where it can't be held to the ultimate standard, invariably take over. They become the tyranny that you and I both and everybody fears, because there's nothing that they're worried about stopping them from doing that. So yeah,
right. Because all kids in public education are taught about Paul Revere, and he actually didn't complete his right. I forgot the name of the guy who actually did complete his right. But they were warning the Patriots that the British were coming, and the British were coming specifically to capture an arms store that they had in a barn where they had their powder, their shots. That's what the British were coming to take.
Right, and that's the first step towards ultimate tyranny is civilian disarmament.
Yeah, and I get people from all over the world, and it's always funny when subjects of the crown like to point out American stuff, and I always reply, I'm not going to say anything that's going to make you mad enough to scratch me with your butter knife, because I honestly think the only politicians sell us fear. That's how they get elected, but they don't fear the people. They don't fear the people not voting for them because they know the people don't have a choice. And ultimately,
they want to keep the people in the dark and spoon feed them distracting issues. It's a magician's trick. It's misdirection. So you're not looking in this hand while I hide the ball. You're looking over here while I let the dove go. I mean, it's classic manipulation, propaganda, to get people to think that the problem is one thing and that you'll solve it, when in fact there's a completely different problem going on.
Well, that's what's ironic about government. Government creates problems, then tells you we're the people that'll fix your problems.
Right.
And it's like they break your leg and then give you a crutch and say, "Here, look at me. I'm here to help you out. Here, take this crutch and let's limp along and talk about things and why you should respect me as your."
Thank God we're not a pure democracy. I mean, because too many people. Abraham Lincoln said, "You can fool some of the people some of the time, or some of the people all the time, and all the people some of the time. You can't fool all the people all the time." Well, I think it was one of the great movie producers that said, "Well, yeah, you can if you have the right budget. You can fool all the people all the time if you got enough big enough budget to sell them on it."
Yeah, and that actually is the libertarian issue right now, because all three out of, I have like 4 other co-hosts, but 3 of them actually ran for office as libertarians in state and well as municipal elections. and they ultimately run into the same problem every single time was the budget to get your message to the people.
Right.
And as well as the fact that the two-party system, you have to fight for ballot access. And I remember in my civics class that my teacher, he was a doctor in high school, was saying this is a republic for and by the people. But we don't have that currently because our political system does not allow all the people to have their voice heard. You know, Jesse the Body Ventura said this, but he said in America, you have one more choice than North Korea.
Oh yeah,
And,
that's true with the two-party system. Yeah.
yeah.
But the
And,
problem is, yeah. Look. This is a whole different subject about whether or not we're better off with a couple extra parties.
mm,
It can backfire on you because
right.
the party that should win can't win because this is like a third party. This is like Ross Perot,
Yeah.
somebody siphoning off votes from the guy that you want to win. So I sympathize. I'm basically a libertarian thinker myself, but I sympathize that they can't get on the ballots. Really, it's funny how the political system, this political spectrum, it's not aligned with liberals and conservatives. It's more of a circle because
Right.
the liberals, they're socially liberal and they're fiscally not conservative. The Republicans are socially and fiscally conservative. A libertarian is sort of socially liberal and fiscally conservative. Like we don't want the government telling us, we don't care who is sleeping with who. You want to have same sex marriage? Welcome to the party, pal. You're going to regret it. But
Yeah.
but don't spend my money doing it. You know what I mean? I don't
Right.
want the government paying for that. People should be able to make their own journey through life. You only live once. Do it your way. Don't hurt anybody else.
That's it.
But
Do no
don't
harm.
count on the government subsidies.
Yeah, because a lot of talks about debt and federal spending right now, and what you'll see is they both spend money. They just spend money different ways on the stuff that they like. And for me, I'm like, full disclosure, I do work for what you would call a school district, what you would call a government agency, and I see firsthand. They always say 20% of all funding in government goes to waste. I think that's a little low. I think that number is extremely low, and that's why I'm looking at what Doge is doing right now. And on paper, I like it. I just would like to see realized results because while they're slashing federal government at the same time, the CR that they introduced, what was it last week, added $360+ billion per year in deficit spending. I was like, how do you merge those two together if you're spending money, deficit spending, and cutting at the same time?
This is one of the things that the midterms are going to hopefully course correct us on. But in the meantime, at least it's moving forward. And
Yeah.
God bless Elon Musk. I think I may go buy a Tesla. I've never been a big EV fan, but there's some used ones on the market right now that are quite a bargain. So
A whole hell of a lot of them are coming on the market here in California right now because
and I think you hear about these bumper stickers. Oh, I bought this car before Elon went crazy. I think I'm going to get one that says FAFO.
Now, as we start to wrap this up, one of the federal agencies that I haven't heard about too many cuts coming to, actually, I don't think they're looking at any law enforcement agencies, but one of them, in particular, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and don't they put the explosives on the end of
Yeah,
that?
that was added a few years ago. BATFE.
And, that old joke, that sounds like a great store that if it was,
Yeah. That's
but
a party I want. That's a party I want to go to.
yeah. In light of the Chevron ruling, where the Supreme Court said government agencies can't make law, effectively they're saying they can't make laws, right?
Well, they can. It was all about interpreting laws and whether
Right.
or not an administrative executive agency like the ATF, the one that really took advantage of it was the EPA. They would
Right.
interpret statutes pass regulations, and they invariably interpret whatever law it is that issue. They interpret it to give the agency as much. Give the power goes to the agency. The interpretation is in the favor of giving the agency power, and what the courts were forced to do in the past was defer to the agency and assume they're right rather than judging it on without giving any more weight to an agency opinion than the challenger's opinion, and that's out the window now. So ATF has been notorious, though, in taking a position, on whether it's bump stocks or pistol braces or some of these other things that I've submitted many products to the firearm technology branch of ATF and had ATF say it's legal, and then they change their mind. And so overnight, these things that people have been buying for years, the agency decided to reinterpret the law and say, no, that's illegal. And that's the kind of thing that causes real constitutional problems because, that's where tyranny can come in. Like the government tells you, yes, okay. And then they decide, we don't like how that's playing out. So we're going to change our mind and say it's not okay. And now you're a criminal overnight by the stroke of our, administrative pen.
Yeah, and that's what's nuts about our government and how it interacts with the people, because how the government has made itself omnipotent and knows all, is all for you, the ultimate big brother, big sister, that Americans, I always say, like, we're all in the same line. But that line, we all have been assigned random numbers. You don't ever know when it's going to be your turn, when the government is going to make an aspect of your life illegal simply because they want to get your vote and they want to appeal to your personal sensibilities and not the grand scheme of what liberty actually is. As long as you're not doing any harm to other people, why does anybody's particular lifestyle, how does that affect you? And I've never understood that since I was a little kid. I was like, if they want to do that and they're not hurting anybody else, how does that affect you enough to where you want to pass laws? You want to,
why are these things the government's business in the first place? Yeah,
precisely. And I remember I said this earlier this week. They were talking about what's going on with the stock market and everything. And somebody said something about government. And I was like, the only thing I want government to do is stay out of my life. And they were like, well, the government's always going to be in your life. And I said, I know that. That's the problem. This isn't I'm not saying anything profound or new or whatever. This was the concept of this nation initially. And if I was to fault George, well, I could fault him for a couple things, but the way he responded to the Whiskey Rebellion, sending what limited federal troops in to the Appalachians to tax alcohol that these people were making to make a living, because this country was basically funded on alcohol and
tobacco
and the taxation of such. And so when we look at what our government is doing now in comparison to what the British Empire was doing to the first Americans, there really is no daylight at this point.
Similarities.
Yeah, it's striking. And so with that, as we wrap this up, I want you to tell everybody where they can buy your book, where they can get in contact with you, and where they can find out more about you as one of our modern day great patriots.
Well, there's three ways to get involved. Even if you don't live in California, you should support or join the California Rifle and Pistol Association, because as I said, we want to stop this stuff in California before it goes anyplace else. And the best way to find out about them is crpa.org, crpa.org. Then everybody should take a look at the Second Amendment Law Center. That's 2alc.org, 2alc.org, because that is a entity that I've gathered all the leading Second Amendment scholars from across the country together as my steering committee. And we are now filing amicus brief, friend of the court briefs, in cases across the country to to try and make sure that all the points that need to be made to win these cases are made. A lot of times, the briefs that the parties are file, they don't have enough room to make all the arguments they need to make. And then, if you want to see how bad the California laws are, or you own a gun in California and you want to stay out of jail, go to calgunlawsbook.com and pick up a copy of my book. And all of these things, folks should realize. I mean, I don't make money on that book. That's a labor of love.
Awesome.
And the rates I charge for the Second Amendment work, I mean, I can't work for free. My wife won't let me, but I'm certainly not. I'm certainly not charging the kind of rates that some other firms are. Okay, this house you see, this is mortgaged. I'm not driving
Right.
a new car. Okay, but I believe in what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm a true believer. I'm not just an advocate. I'm a true believer. My chocolate lab's name is Heston. Okay, so
Nice.
I we do need people to pitch in. If you got a couple of bucks that you can spare to be a part of the history of fighting for our Second Amendment rights and for our freedoms in the future and our children's freedoms, now would be the time, because the fight is on.
And I will say this: we don't make a lot of money, but we do make a little money here on the Black Powder Podcast. We will be contributing to CRPA in your ongoing fight to ensure the liberty to defend yourself. Thank you. And for Americans to defend themselves, because like we said earlier on, if you don't think this fight in California is relevant, ask people in Nevada and Colorado, New Mexico, and somewhat light purple Texas.
Yeah. Any of these states, they can shift, man.
Yeah.
So you can't relax. Freedom isn't free. You cannot relax. I mean, I understand people are living their daily lives. You got to get up, got to work, take care of the kids, pay the electric bill. I mean, I get it, but there are certain causes that people should understand the importance of being a part of, and firearms, self-defense, civil rights, and the Second Amendment is one of them.
Gun rights are civil rights, and if you have any doubt about that, Google Martin Luther King and his CCW, as well as the Mulford Act. Yep. If you doubt me, just go find out for yourself. So, with that being said, is there any other things you want to plug, or any other ways that people can find out about you?
Even if you don't want to join CRPA, just go there and sign up. You will get the email newsletters, which always do have a fundraising thing on the bottom. But don't worry if you can't afford it. At least being informed is as important as being involved. If you know what's going on, you can help stop it, even if it's just going on social media and going viral against some claim that right, gun control law is a good idea.
So I want to, before we close out, I want to point out one thing. Being informed is very important, because you may inform somebody else that will get involved, and maybe they can give. So exactly. Let's keep this rolling. Let's snowball our Second Amendment rights and the fight for them. Every thunderstorm starts with one raindrop, and that one raindrop would be you talking to somebody else.
I'm gonna use that line in the next fundraiser.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, with that being said, thank you very much, Mr. Michel. I would like to have you back on once we have some victories. You could sort of do your victory lap on here on our podcast.
I'd love it. I'd love it, especially if the Supreme Court takes something. Even if they don't, before they rule, you can have me on. We'll talk about specific cases and what their significance can be, not just in California, but across the country.
So I would appreciate this. As you are much more grounded in this legal battle than I, if something does come up, if you could just shoot me an email and say, "Hey, I got something,"
sure.
I would truly appreciate that, because like I said, I followed you for a long time, going way back to when you had that competition. That was years ago, because like I said, I think
I may have to do that again. I forgot about that name. I had photo caption contests and gave them a free book. I think do that again.
That's awesome.
Kind of fun.
They are very fun, especially when I won. I was like, hell yeah, it was pretty cool. Fireworks in the front, firearms in the back. So fireworks in the front, firearms in the back. So thank you very much.
My
We
pleasure.
look forward to talking to you again. I ask you to stay for like 2 minutes after I click this button, and it's going to be a slight pause. This has been the Black Powder Podcast. And with that being said, and as we always close, live free or die.